Today I'm going to tell you the story of how my parents met. Do you know how your parents met? I bet it'd be interesting to find out. Now, what's interesting about this is when I talked to my parents about how they met, they did not want to tell me. My father was a storyteller, but never about himself. So I asked him and I asked him, and I never got any answers. Until one day, I asked him, I said, Dad, how did you meet Mom? And he told me this story. He said, he was going to school in Boston. He was going to a college there in Boston called Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was a geologist and he loved science. But he also loved Chinese culture. So he used to go to museums in Boston and he would, go to exhibits about China, and he would study the language a little bit on his own, not a lot. But he was just fascinated by Chinese culture, I think partly because he was really fascinated by Taoism and that religion from ancient China. So he told me that one day he decided that he was going to meet a Chinese girl, basically. And he found out that there was a ship arriving with a new Chinese girl coming from Taiwan who was going to be a scientist at MIT, where he went to school. So he looked at the register and he saw her name and he saw when she was coming, and he decided he was going to go meet her and welcome her to the United States and befriend her. So he did. He went and he met her and he became friends with her and he became romantically interested in her, and eventually he proposed to her and she became his wife. And so they had that relationship and they moved to California together. They moved to San Diego, which is where I grew up. And my mom was studying at the Scripps Oceanographic Institute of Oceanography, which is at UCSD. And my father was getting a PhD also in geology there. So they're both trying to get their PhDs. They had just gotten their master's degrees. My mom finished her PhD. My father did not. He got very distracted and he dropped out and did all sorts of other things. But you've heard stories about my father. And what's interesting about this is they eventually got divorced because their relationship was not sustainable the way that it was. But when I heard this story, it actually made me feel, really wonderful to sort of get information, to find out about, those early years and how it came to be. I wouldn't say, super impressed by the fact that my father had sort of been, waiting for her. But I also admired his, conviction and desire to be kind to somebody who was showing up in the United States. So I went to my mom and I told her this story. I said, well, did you know that, that my dad was waiting for you and he saw that you were going to be showing up on this boat? And my mom said, no, that's not true. That's not a true story. There's no way that happened. I would never be okay with somebody waiting for me. I mean, it was a long boat ride. My mom was seasick the whole time. She just refused to believe that was possible. And I said, oh, okay, well, I must be wrong. And I don't know whose version of the story was right. But I was still glad I got to hear the story, because even though we don't always know the veracity or the truthfulness of stories, it is still valuable to hear them. What's interesting is that several years later, when my mom was talking to me about something else, she actually said to me, I don't remember what we were talking about, but she referred back to the story that I had told her, and she said, I'm still angry that your father was waiting for me when I got off that boat. He didn't give me a chance to make up my own mind and meet people myself. And so over time, she had come to accept maybe that version of events. Maybe she had reflected on it. But she still felt like, she had a role in that story and that she had an opinion about how that story unfolded. I don't know what's right or wrong. I am very glad that my parents met. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And I'm also glad that they got divorced, because it was not a good match. And I ended up having a very good childhood. I have a wonderful stepfather and a wonderful stepmother. But as I think about that story, what really occurs to me is that stories are powerful, and the way that we interact with stories is really important. And when we don't know the stories of our past, we miss out on the opportunity of understanding. So I have a much greater understanding, I believe, of how my family unfolded because my father was willing to tell me. I hope that you have a chance someday to hear the story of how your parents met. Thanks.